It was a quiet morning beneath the earth, in a small and comfortable home where Mole had lived for as long as he could remember. The walls were warm, the air was still, and everything rested in its proper place. There were shelves for small things, a chair for sitting, and a table that knew the gentle rhythm of simple days. Mole had always been content there. But on this particular morning, something felt different. The air carried a softness that seemed to come from far away, as though the world outside was calling without using words. Mole paused in the middle of his spring cleaning and listened. At first, he heard nothing at all. Only the quiet of his own home. Only the familiar stillness. Yet beneath that stillness was a gentle pull, a feeling that the day held something calm and new. He set down his brush and stood very still. Then, without quite knowing why, Mole moved toward the door. He opened it slowly. Fresh air slipped inside, cool and kind, brushing softly against his face. It carried the scent of grass and sunlight, and something else, something that felt wide and open. Mole stepped outside. The world above ground felt larger than he had remembered. The sky stretched gently overhead, pale and calm. The earth felt soft beneath his feet. Nothing rushed. Nothing demanded attention. Everything seemed to invite him forward in the most patient way. He began to walk. At first, he walked slowly, simply enjoying the feel of the open air. The grass moved lightly in a breeze that barely touched the ground. Somewhere nearby, a bird made a quiet sound, then settled again into silence. Mole followed a path that did not look like a path at all. It curved gently through the grass and between small trees. He did not know where it led, but he did not mind. The morning felt like a promise that did not need to be explained. After a while, he noticed a sound. It was soft at first, almost like a memory. A gentle, steady sound that rose and fell without effort. Mole paused and listened. The sound seemed to come from ahead, just beyond a small hill covered in moss and sunlight. He walked toward it. The sound grew clearer. It was not loud. It did not interrupt the quiet. Instead, it blended with the morning in a way that felt natural and soothing. Then Mole reached the top of the hill and saw something he had never seen before. A river. It moved slowly, its surface smooth and calm. Light rested upon it, shifting gently as the water flowed. The river did not hurry. It did not try to go anywhere quickly. It simply moved, steady and sure, as though it had all the time in the world. Mole stood very still. He felt something inside him soften. Something that had been quiet for a long time seemed to wake gently. He did not know why the river felt so familiar, but it did. He stepped closer. The grass near the water was cool and green. The air felt different here, lighter somehow, as if it had been washed by the steady movement of the river. Mole sat down near the edge and listened to the sound of the water passing by. It was a comforting sound, a steady sound, a sound that did not ask anything from him. He might have stayed there for a long time, simply listening, if not for a small movement nearby. A boat drifted gently along the river, guided more by the current than by any effort. In the boat sat a figure who seemed perfectly at ease, as though he had always belonged there. This was Rat. Rat moved with calm confidence, using the oars only when needed, never rushing the water. When he noticed Mole sitting by the riverbank, he smiled in a quiet, welcoming way. "Hello," Rat said softly. Mole returned the greeting, a little shy but curious. "Hello. First time at the river?" Rat asked. Mole nodded. Yes, I didn't know it was here. Rat's smile deepened. It's always here, he said. You just have to find it. He guided the boat gently toward the bank and held out a paw. Would you like to come aboard? Mole hesitated only for a moment. The river looked calm. The boat moved softly. There was no reason to feel uncertain. He stepped into the boat. The wood felt warm beneath him. The water moved gently around them, steady and reassuring. Rat pushed away from the shore and allowed the current to guide them forward. They did not speak for a while. There was no need. The river carried them quietly, and the morning seemed to stretch endlessly ahead. The sky reflected in the water, pale and open. Small ripples formed and disappeared. The sound of the oars dipping lightly into the river felt rhythmic and calm. This is my favorite place, Rat said at last. The river knows how to move without hurrying. Mole leaned back slightly, feeling the gentle motion of the boat. He understood what Rat meant. The river did not rush. It did not ask for anything. It simply existed, steady and kind. They drifted past grassy banks and small patches of shade. The world seemed to slow around them. Even time felt softer here, as though it too had decided to float rather than move. After a while, Rat guided the boat toward a small dock made of smooth wood and moss. They stepped out together and sat near the edge of the water. The river continued its quiet journey. Mole felt a deep sense of calm settle over him. He did not know how long he had been there, and he did not feel the need to know. This is a good place to rest, Rat said. Mole nodded. They sat together in silence, watching the water move and the light shift gently across its surface. Nothing needed to happen. Nothing needed to change. The day stretched softly around them, full of quiet moments and gentle sounds. And as Mole listened to the steady rhythm of the river, he felt something he had not felt before. A peaceful sense that the world was larger and kinder than he had imagined. The river flowed on. The morning remained calm. And the story, like the water, continued quietly forward. The river moved at its own quiet pace, carrying the small boat forward without effort. Mole sat comfortably across from Rat, still feeling the gentle surprise of this new world. The air above the water felt cool and soft, as if it had been smoothed by the steady flow beneath them. Neither of them spoke for a while. There was something about the river that made words feel unnecessary. The sound of the water against the sides of the boat created a steady rhythm, calm and reassuring. Mole let his eyes follow the slow movement of light across the surface, watching how the ripples formed and faded without hurry. This is where I like to be, Rat said at last, dipping an oar lightly into the water. There is always something to notice, but nothing that demands too much attention. Mole nodded. He understood that feeling already. They drifted along the bank, where long grasses leaned gently toward the water. Now and then, a small leaf would fall and float beside them for a moment, before slipping away again. The river did not keep anything for long. It simply carried everything onward in its calm and patient way. After a time, Rat guided the boat toward a small wooden landing tucked beneath a cluster of trees. The dock was simple and worn smooth by quiet use. It felt like a place meant for resting rather than arriving. This is my home, Rat said. Mole stepped onto the dock carefully and looked around. The trees formed a soft canopy overhead, letting in only the gentlest light. A narrow path led up from the water's edge to a small doorway set into the bank. The door stood open. Inside, the space felt warm and welcoming. There were shelves with simple things placed neatly upon them, a chair near a small table, and a window that looked out toward the river. Everything seemed to belong exactly where it was. Mole felt at ease immediately. Rat moved about quietly, setting out a small meal without any fuss. They sat together near the open window and ate slowly, watching the water beyond. The river moved past as it always had, untroubled by time or plans. "You can stay as long as you like," Rat said. Mole smiled. He felt no urge to leave. After they finished eating, they returned to the boat. The afternoon had softened into a gentle glow, the light turning warmer as it settled across the water. The air carried a faint scent of grass and distant trees. They pushed away from the dock and allowed the current to guide them once more. This time, the river seemed even calmer. The surface reflected the sky in long, smooth stretches, broken only by the soft movement of the oars. Mole leaned back slightly and let the motion of the boat rock him gently. "Sometimes," Rat said, "we do nothing at all. We simply float." Mole thought that sounded perfect. They drifted along without direction, letting the river choose their path. The banks passed slowly, revealing small patches of wildflowers and quiet stretches of shade. A dragonfly hovered briefly above the water, then disappeared into the warm air. Time felt different here. It did not move in straight lines or sharp turns. It moved like the river, steady, patient, unhurried. As the light began to fade toward evening, the sky softened into pale colors that reflected gently on the water's surface. The air grew cooler, but not cold. Comfortable. Still. Rat guided the boat toward a calm bend in the river, where tall reeds swayed lightly. They stopped there and allowed the boat to rest among them. The world felt very quiet now. Mole listened to the faint sounds around them, the soft movement of water, the whisper of grass, the distant call of a bird settling for the night. None of the sounds were sharp or sudden. They blended together into a gentle background that seemed to invite rest. "This is the best time," Rat said quietly, "when the day slows and the river keeps moving." Mole closed his eyes for a moment, feeling the steady rhythm of the boat beneath him. He did not feel tired in a heavy way, only calm, only content. They stayed there as the light continued to soften. The sky grew deeper in color, and the first hints of evening appeared. The river reflected everything without effort, holding the quiet moment without trying to change it. Eventually, Rat lifted the oars again and guided them slowly back along the water. The path home did not feel like a journey. It felt like a continuation of the same peaceful drift. When they reached the dock, the evening had settled fully. A gentle glow lingered in the sky, and the river moved quietly beneath it. Mole stepped out of the boat and paused for a moment, looking back at the water. He felt something settle inside him, a calm understanding that he had found a place where nothing needed to be hurried. Rat tied the boat loosely and turned toward the open doorway. "You can stay here tonight," he said. Mole nodded. The idea felt natural. Inside, the room was warm and still. The window remained open, allowing the soft sound of the river to continue inside. Mole settled into a chair and listened. The water moved steadily. The night arrived gently. Nothing disturbed the quiet. As Mole rested there, feeling the calm presence of the river just beyond the window, He knew that tomorrow would come slowly, just as this day had. There would be more drifting, more quiet moments, and more gentle sounds. The river would continue. The boat would wait. And the story would move forward at its own peaceful pace. Evening settled slowly along the riverbank, not as a sudden change, but as a gentle shift in light and air. The sky softened into pale gold, and then into calm shades of blue, and the water reflected each color as it passed. Mole stood near the doorway of Rat's riverside home, looking out across the quiet surface of the river. The day had been long in the most peaceful way, full of drifting, soft conversation and the steady comfort of moving water. Rat stepped outside and joined him. "This is my favorite hour," Rat said quietly, "when the river grows still and the world seems to listen." Mole nodded. He could feel that stillness now. The air felt cooler, but not cold. The kind of cool that invited rest. The kind that made every sound softer. They walked down the small path to the dock and untied the boat. The wood creaked gently as they stepped aboard. Rat pushed them away from the shore with a light movement of the oar, and the current welcomed them once again. They did not go far. There was no need. The river carried them along a slow bend where tall reeds stood like quiet watchers at the edge of the water. The surface of the river moved gently, barely rippling beneath the fading light. Mole leaned back and let the motion of the boat rock him slightly. "This feels different from the day," he said. Rat smiled. "Evening on the river is softer. Everything lets go of the day and prepares for rest." They drifted without direction. The sky darkened slowly, and the first stars appeared one by one. They did not rush into view. They simply arrived, quietly and patiently. A small bird called from somewhere among the reeds and then fell silent again. The sound did not break the calm. It blended into it. Mole watched the reflection of the stars form on the surface of the water. Each light trembled slightly, then settled as the river carried it forward. "It feels like the river is dreaming," he said. Rat dipped the oars lightly, guiding the boat toward a quieter stretch where the banks curved inward and the water grew even calmer. "Perhaps it is," Rat replied. "Or perhaps it helps us dream." They allowed the boat to come to rest among the reeds. The gentle movement of the water rocked them slowly. The sky above had deepened into soft blue, and the moon rose carefully over the trees, casting a pale glow across the river. Mole felt his thoughts slow. He did not try to follow them. He simply listened to the steady sound of the water brushing against the boat. Rat rested his oars across his lap and looked out at the quiet river. "Sometimes," he said softly, "it is enough to sit and let the world move without us." Mole agreed. They stayed there for a long while, saying very little. The boat drifted just enough to keep the water whispering along its sides. The reeds swayed gently. The moon climbed a little higher. Time passed, but it did not feel like passing. It felt like resting. At last, Rat lifted the oars again and guided the boat back toward the dock. The night had settled fully now. The sky was calm and clear. The river moved as steadily as ever. They tied the boat loosely and stepped onto the dock. The wooden boards felt cool beneath their feet. Inside the house, a small lamp glowed softly, casting warm light across the simple room. Mole sat near the window and listened to the river outside. Rat moved quietly, setting things in order for the night. There was no hurry in his movements. Everything was done slowly, carefully, as though the night itself were part of the home. Mole leaned back and let the sound of the water fill the room. The river flowed on. The night remained calm. The world asked for nothing. He felt a deep sense of comfort settle over him, like a blanket placed gently across his thoughts. The day had drifted by without effort. The evening had followed just as softly. Outside, the moonlight rested on the water, and the reeds stood quietly along the bank. Nothing moved quickly. Nothing needed to change. Mole closed his eyes for a moment, listening to the steady rhythm of the river. Tomorrow would come slowly. The boat would wait. And the story would continue, just as gently as the water moving past the shore. Morning arrived gently along the riverbank, not with brightness or noise, but with a quiet change in the air. The sky grew pale and calm, and the water reflected the soft light as it slowly returned. Mole woke to the steady sound of the river outside the window. He lay still for a moment, listening. The gentle movement of water against the bank created a rhythm that felt comforting and familiar, as though it had always been there. He rose quietly and stepped outside. The grass was cool beneath his feet. A thin mist hovered just above the river's surface, drifting slowly, as if it too were waking from rest. Everything felt unhurried. The morning did not rush forward. It unfolded softly. Rat sat at the edge of the dock, looking out across the water. He did not turn when Mole approached. He seemed content simply to watch the river as it moved. "Good morning," Mole said softly. "Good morning," Rat replied. They sat together without speaking for a while. The river moved steadily, reflecting the pale sky and the shapes of trees along the bank. A small ripple formed and faded near the shore, then another. Nothing disturbed the calm. After a time, Rat stood and stretched slowly. "Would you like to drift a little?" he asked. Mole smiled. "Yes." They untied the boat and stepped aboard. The wood felt warm from the early light, and the water welcomed them as they pushed away from the dock. Rat dipped the oars gently, guiding them into the slow current. They did not go far. The morning felt like a place to remain rather than a time to travel. They drifted past patches of tall grass and small clusters of wildflowers growing along the bank. A bird flew low across the water, its reflection passing beneath it like a shadow that did not mind being left behind. Mole watched the light move across the surface of the river. Each ripple caught the pale glow of the sky, then released it again. The water seemed to carry the morning slowly forward, without effort. "This is the quietest hour," Rat said, "before the day remembers itself." Mole understood. The world felt suspended, as though it had paused between night and day. Nothing asked for attention. Nothing demanded action. They allowed the boat to drift toward a bend in the river, where the banks curved inward, and the water grew deeper and calmer. Tall trees leaned slightly over the surface, their branches reflected in the stillness below. Rat rested the oars across the boat and let the current carry them. Mole leaned back and closed his eyes for a moment. The gentle rocking of the boat felt steady and reassuring. He listened to the soft sound of water against wood, the faint movement of leaves, the quiet breath of morning. He did not fall asleep. He simply rested. When he opened his eyes again, the mist had begun to lift. The sky grew a little brighter, though still soft. The river remained calm. They drifted until the sun rose just enough to warm the air. The light touched the surface of the water and moved slowly across it, like a hand smoothing a blanket. Eventually, Rat guided them back towards dock. They stepped out and walked slowly along the bank. The grass brushed lightly against their feet. A dragonfly hovered near the water, then disappeared into the reeds. They returned to the small house by the river and sat near the open window. The room felt warm and still. The river's sound filled the space gently, never loud, never absent. Mole felt a deep sense of comfort settle inside him. He did not think about what might come later. He did not feel the need to plan. The river moved steadily. The morning unfolded quietly. That was enough. Rat poured a simple meal and set it down without fuss. They ate slowly, watching the water through the open window. Some days, Rat said, are meant only for drifting. Mole nodded. Outside, the river continued its calm journey. The light grew warmer, then softened again. Time moved in its own quiet way. After they finished eating, Mole stepped back outside and sat near the edge of the water. He watched a leaf fall gently onto the surface and float away. It did not resist. It did not hurry. It simply followed the current. He felt the same calm within himself. The river flowed on. The morning remained gentle. Nothing needed to change. And as the day continued to unfold in its quiet, patient way, Mole knew that wherever the river led next, it would do so slowly, with time enough for rest and room enough for quiet moments to stretch as long as they wished. The day moved forward slowly, as it often did beside the river. Nothing hurried the hours along. The light shifted gently across the grass, and the water continued its steady path without asking where it was going. Mole sat near the edge of the riverbank, watching the current glide past. The morning had softened into afternoon, though the difference was barely noticeable. Time seemed to flow here in the same calm way as the water, steady and untroubled. Rat approached quietly and sat beside him. "There is a path beyond the trees," Rat said. "Not far. A place where the forest grows deeper and the air feels different." Mole turned to look at him. "Is it quiet there?" Rat nodded. "Very." That was enough. They rose and walked slowly away from the river. The path curved gently through tall grass and then slipped into a cluster of trees. The air beneath the branches felt cooler, shaded and calm. Light filtered through the leaves in soft patches, moving slowly across the ground. They did not speak for a while. The forest had its own quiet language. Small sounds, faint movements, the gentle shift of leaves against one another. Nothing loud, nothing sudden. Mole noticed how the ground felt softer here, covered with moss and fallen leaves. Each step made almost no sound at all. It felt like walking through a place that preferred stillness. After a while, the path opened into a small clearing. Tall trees stood in a loose circle, their branches arching overhead. The space felt sheltered, peaceful. "This is a good place to rest," Rat said. They sat down on a fallen log. The wood felt cool and steady. A faint breeze moved through the branches above, carrying the scent of earth and green leaves. Mole listened. The forest did not move quickly. It breathed slowly, like a creature that had learned patience long ago. Somewhere in the distance, a bird shifted in its nest, then settled again into silence. "It feels different from the river," Mole said softly. Rat nodded. "The river moves. The forest waits." Mole liked that. They remained there for some time, doing nothing at all. The light shifted gradually, growing softer as the afternoon drifted toward evening. Shadows lengthened between the trees, but they did not feel heavy, only calm. Mole leaned back slightly and closed his eyes. He could still hear the faint memory of the river far away, but here the forest felt deeper, more still. He did not fall asleep. He simply rested. After a while, Rat stood and stretched gently. "We should head back before the light fades," he said. They walked slowly along the path, returning toward the open air. The river came into view again, glimmering softly through the trees. It moved just as it always had, steady and patient. They stepped onto the dock and sat side by side, looking out across the water. The sky above had begun to change color, shifting toward the gentle tones of evening. A soft breeze moved across the surface of the river. Small ripples formed and faded. The world seemed to settle into a quieter rhythm. "Some days," Rat said, "are meant for walking. Others are meant for drifting. Today was both." Mole smiled. They remained there as the light continued to fade. The river reflected the sky in soft colors. The air grew cooler, but it did not feel cold, only calm. Mole felt a deep sense of comfort settle within him. He thought of the forest path, the clearing among the trees, the quiet walk back to the water. Everything had unfolded slowly, without effort. The river flowed on. The trees stood still. The evening arrived gently. Nothing needed to happen next. They rose and walked back toward the small house by the river. Inside, the room felt warm and familiar. The window remained open, letting in the steady sound of the water. Mole sat near the window and listened. The river moved quietly in the darkening light. The day had passed without hurry. The evening followed just as gently. He felt calm. Outside, the first stars began to appear. The forest rested. The river continued its quiet journey. And as the night settled softly over the water and the trees, the story moved forward in its own unhurried way, carried gently by the same steady current that had guided them all day long. Night arrived beside the river in the gentlest way possible. The light did not disappear suddenly. It faded slowly, as though the day were folding itself away with care. The sky deepened into soft shades of blue, and the first stars appeared quietly above the treetops. Mole sat near the window of the small riverside house, listening. The river moved steadily in the darkness. Its sound felt softer at night, smoother, like a whisper that never quite ended. The air carried a cool calmness, wrapping itself around the quiet home and the trees beyond. Rat moved quietly about the room, setting a small lamp near the table. Its glow was warm and low, enough to see by without disturbing the stillness. "It's a peaceful night," Rat said softly. Mole nodded. "The river sounds different." "It always does," Rat replied. "At night it feels deeper, slower." They stepped outside together. The grass felt cool beneath their feet, and the dock lay still beside the water. The river reflected the faint glow of the moon, forming long, pale lines that moved gently with the current. They untied the boat without speaking. The wood creaked softly as they stepped aboard. Rat pushed them away from the shore with a light movement, and the river accepted them once more. They did not row far. There was no need. The boat drifted along a quiet stretch where the banks curved inward and the trees leaned close to the water. Their branches formed soft shapes against the sky, reflected below in dark, gentle patterns. Mole leaned back and looked upward. the stars appeared clearer here, free from the brightness of day. They seemed to rest in place, steady and patient. The boat rocked slowly. The sound of water brushing against the sides felt steady, almost like breathing. Mole closed his eyes for a moment and listened. The world felt calm. The river moved. The night held everything gently in place. Rat rested the oars across his lap and allowed the current to guide them. "This is when the river rests," he said, "not by stopping, but by moving without effort." Mole understood. They drifted past reeds that swayed lightly, their shapes barely visible in the dim light. Somewhere in the distance, a night bird called once and then fell silent. The sound did not disturb the calm. It became part of it. The moon rose a little higher, casting a soft glow across the water. The surface of the river reflected it gently, the light breaking into small, moving shapes that faded and returned. Mole felt his thoughts slow. He did not try to follow them. He simply let them pass like the reflections on the water. They allowed the boat to come to rest in a quiet bend of the river where the current moved slowly. The reeds stood tall around them, and the sky stretched open above. Time felt different here. It did not move forward in a straight line. It drifted like the boat, carried by the same steady rhythm. After a long while, Rat lifted the oars again and guided them gently back toward the dock. The house by the river glowed softly in the darkness, a small and steady light. They stepped onto the dock and tied the boat loosely. The boards felt cool and still. The river continued its quiet journey beside them. Inside, the room felt warm. The lamp cast a gentle glow across the walls, and the open window allowed the sound of the river to continue filling the space. Mole sat near the window and listened. The water moved steadily. The night remained calm. Nothing hurried. He felt a deep sense of comfort settle over him, like a quiet understanding that this place asked for nothing but presence. Outside, the stars continued their slow journey across the sky. The trees stood quietly along the bank. The river flowed on, steady and patient. Mole closed his eyes for a moment. Tomorrow would come softly. The boat would wait, and the river would continue its calm path through the night and into the morning. For now, everything rested. The house remained still. The water moved gently, and the story drifted forward in the same quiet way. Steady, calm, carried by the river through the night. The night along the river had grown deeper, not darker in a heavy way, only quieter. The small house by the river stood still beneath the sky, its window open just enough to let the sound of the water drift inside. The lamp had been turned low, leaving only a soft glow that warmed the room without disturbing the calm. Mole lay comfortably, listening. The river moved in its steady rhythm, brushing gently against the bank. Each small ripple formed and faded without urgency. The sound felt constant, like breathing that never tired. After a while, Mole rose quietly and stepped outside. The grass felt cool beneath his feet. The sky above was clear and calm, filled with stars that seemed to rest rather than shine. The moon hung low over the trees, casting a pale light across the water. Rat sat at the end of the dock, looking out across the river. "You're awake," Rat said softly. Mole nodded. "The river sounds different tonight." "It always does when everything else is still," Rat replied. They untied the boat without speaking further. The wood moved gently beneath them as they stepped aboard. Rat pushed them away from the shore, with a slow, careful motion. The boat drifted. No oars moved. No sound broke the calm. They allowed the current to carry them into a quiet stretch where the river widened and the banks grew distant. The surface of the water reflected the stars above, forming long, trembling lines of light that moved slowly with the current. Mole looked upward. The sky felt vast, but not overwhelming. It felt calm, as though the night itself were resting. The boat rocked gently beneath them. The sound of water against the sides felt steady and reassuring. Mole leaned back and closed his eyes, letting the rhythm settle into his thoughts. He did not try to sleep. He simply rested. Rat remained still, watching the slow movement of the river. He did not feel the need to guide the boat. The current knew where to go. They drifted past tall reeds that stood like quiet guardians along the bank. Now and then, a soft sound came from the distance, a night bird shifting in its place, or a faint breeze moving through the grass. None of the sounds felt sharp. None of them disturbed the calm. The moon rose a little higher, casting a faint glow across the water. The reflections moved slowly, stretching and fading as the boat passed through them. Time felt suspended. It did not move forward quickly. It did not ask for attention. It simply existed, like the river itself. After a long while, Rat dipped an oar lightly into the water and guided the boat toward a familiar bend where the reeds grew thicker. They allowed the boat to rest there, barely moving. Mole listened. The river whispered. The reeds swayed. The night remained calm. He felt a deep sense of comfort settle within him, a quiet understanding that this place asked for nothing but presence. Eventually, Rat guided them back toward the dock. The house by the river waited quietly, its small light steady in the darkness. They stepped onto the wooden boards and tied the boat loosely. The river continued its slow journey beside them. Inside, the room felt warm and still. The lamp glowed softly. The open window allowed the sound of the water to continue filling the space. Mole sat near the window once more and listened. The stars moved slowly across the sky. The trees stood quietly along the bank. The river flowed on. He felt sleep come gently, not suddenly, but like a soft blanket settling over his thoughts. The day had passed calmly. The night followed just as gently. Tomorrow would arrive slowly. The boat would wait. The river would continue. For now, everything rested. The world remained quiet. The water moved steadily, and the story drifted forward, carried softly through the deep calm of night. The night remained calm along the river, and everything seemed to settle into a deeper stillness. The small house by the bank stood quietly beneath the fading stars, its window open just enough to let the sound of the water drift inside. Mole woke slowly, not fully, only enough to notice the steady rhythm of the river. The sound felt familiar now, like something he had always known. He lay still for a moment, listening to the quiet movement outside. Nothing hurried. Nothing asked for attention. The sky beyond the window had begun to change. The darkness softened into a pale gray, and the stars faded one by one, not disappearing suddenly, but slipping away gently as morning approached. Mole rose and stepped outside. The air felt cool and fresh. A thin mist hovered above the river, drifting slowly across the surface. The water moved just as it always had, steady, patient, untroubled by time. Rat stood at the end of the dock, watching the river. "Morning comes quietly," he said. Mole nodded. He could feel it. The light returned not with brightness, but with calm. They untied the boat and stepped aboard. The wood creaked softly beneath their feet. Rat pushed them away from the dock, and the river carried them forward once more. They did not row. There was no need. The current moved steadily, guiding the boat along the familiar path. The mist drifted around them, parting gently as they passed. The world felt suspended between night and day, a moment that did not belong to either. Mole watched the water glide beneath them. He did not try to follow where it went. He simply listened to its steady rhythm. The sky grew lighter. The trees along the bank became clearer, their shapes soft in the early light. A bird stirred somewhere nearby, then settled again. They drifted around a bend where the river widened and the surface grew smooth as glass. The light touched the water gently, forming long reflections that moved slowly with the current. Mole felt calm, deeply calm. He thought of the days beside the river, the drifting, the quiet walks, the soft evenings, the steady nights. Everything had unfolded slowly, without effort. The river had carried each moment forward in its own time. They allowed the boat to come to rest near the bank. Rat dipped the oars lightly and guided them back toward the dock. The house by the river waited quietly, just as it always had. They stepped onto the wooden boards and tied the boat loosely. The morning had arrived fully now, though it remained soft and calm. The mist lifted slowly. The water continued its steady journey. Mole sat near the edge of the river and watched a small leaf drift past. It floated without resistance, carried gently by the current. He felt the same calm within himself. Nothing needed to be planned. Nothing needed to change. The river would continue. The days would unfold slowly. The quiet would remain. Rat sat beside him, looking out across the water. "It is good to have a place where time moves gently," he said. Mole agreed. They remained there for a while, saying nothing, listening to the steady sound of the river. The sky grew brighter, but it did not feel harsh. The morning felt like a continuation of the night, just lighter. The story did not end. It simply rested. The river flowed on, steady and calm. The trees stood quietly along the bank. The small house remained warm and still. And as the day began once more in its own gentle way, the world by the river felt unchanged. A place where drifting was enough, where quiet was welcome, and where the story would always continue as softly as the water moving past the shore.